2SLGBTQ History Month, brought to you by the student-led board-wide equity group. Equality means more than just passing laws. The struggle is really won in the hearts and minds of the community, where it really counts. Equality. To start off our presentation, we will be speaking about important history. And what are some important events, notable figures, and examples of the LGBTQ representation in history? Start off our
Diversity and representation in history is not really a thing shown in our history books, but it was relevant in many, many different cultures around the world, right before colonization. So, for example, Oceania, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America were 5 prominent countries that did have many people identifying with different sexual orientations or different gender identities, and it was very accepted in their communities. So, Oceania, third genders and people talking on traditional gender roles of another gender were accepted prior to colonization. In Asia, multiple gender identities and forms of expression were recognized and a part of their culture. They had their own subculture and held an important role in society. In the Middle East, although the 2S LGBTQ community was not as accepted yet compared to the other countries, they've always existed and people have acknowledged them without harming the community. Prior to colonization, African culture embraced people who took on the traditional gender roles of a different gender and were even seen as special. In Latin America, people of a third gender were well liked and accepted culturally in communities before the arrival of colonists. So, as we can see, in many, many places across the globe, it was very accepted to identify with a different gender or to have a different sexual orientation. And you may be wondering, where did all the stereotypes and stigma come from if it was so widely accepted? Well, it was all thanks to the British colonization. Now you may be wondering, this act was horrid, but how does it affect us today? It was made in 1533 and it is currently 2021. How are we still affected by an act that was made a very long time ago? Well, let me tell you, there are major lasting effects today. Though homosexuality was decriminalized during 1967 and the rest of the UK in 1982, many countries still enforce homophobic laws in their penal codes to this day due to the influence of the British Buggery Act of 1533. People across the globe are still oppressed for their sexual or gender identity and are still wrongly incarcerated. This is the work of British colonization. The British Empire and government officials have publicly apologized for their actions in the past, but have not taken any real progressive action to repay their debts to the Commonwealth countries, thus still continuing the deep-rooted homophobic views into people's minds in some part of the world that still enforce Britain's hateful views. So I know this act was made a very, very, very long time ago, but there are still relevant issues that affect us today, that affect us in our communities, that affect us in our schools, that affects kids we don't even know across the globe who don't feel safe to come out, who don't have that opportunity for that safe space. And it shows that whatever action we take, even if it is something that doesn't seem relevant at the time, it still does affect many, many future generations.
Important events. Stonewall Riot. During the late 1960s, it was illegal in most American states to be gay. There were no laws protecting those who identified as gay from discrimination, making it dangerous for gay people to be identified in public. The Stonewall Inn was a gay club that opened in 1967 within Manhattan, New York. On Tuesday, June 24th, police raided the Stonewall, and a deputy inspector returned the following Friday with intentions to tear down the bar and shut it down permanently. Immediately, the police encountered resistance. Members and supporters of the LGBTQ community gathered across the streets, chanting and fighting against police brutality. The riot lasted for 5 days and ended with 21 arrests and many injuries among police and rioters. This ignited a spark, and the energy manifested within weeks, leading to a gay power march from Washington Square Park to Stonewall. Additionally, this riot led to the formation of the Gay Liberation Front, who held dances to raise money, where the proceeds funded an underground newspaper, a bail fund for members, and lunches for the poor.
Another important event in LGBTQ history is pride parades and how they changed throughout the years, how they started in the first place, and what they were really all about. In 1970, the first pride parade occurred in New York, but then it was known as Gay Liberation Day. It was actually sparked by the Stonewall Uprising, and that event inspired people to start talking about the civil rights inequalities surrounding LGBTQ people, known now as 2SLGBTQ+. In 1971, Canada had its first Gay Liberation March. This was held outside of the Parliament buildings in the pouring rain, where a bunch of people gathered to present to the Parliament a petition for equal LGBTQ rights. Later on, in 1980s, these parades/marches had started to spread all around the world, including Sydney, Mexico City, Montreal, and more.
The pride flag is the most commonly used symbol of the LGBTQ+ community. It was created by Gilbert Baker, an openly gay man and drag queen from Kansas, USA in 1977. There were 8 colors in the original pride flag, each with their own meaning: hot pink for sex, red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, turquoise for magic/art, indigo for serenity, and violet for spirit. Because of mass production issues, the hot pink and turquoise were taken out and the indigo replaced for blue, giving us the rainbow flag we know today.
In 2017, a group named More Color, More Pride added an extra black and an extra brown stripe to the flag with the goal of better representing people of color in the 2S LGBTQ+ community. In 2018, a graphic designer named Daniel Quasar added a 5-stripe chevron design to the flag, including the black and brown stripes from before to represent people of color who are 2S LGBTQ+ community members, and he also added pink, light blue, and white stripes, which are the colors of the transgender pride flag. Even more recently this year, a yellow triangle and a purple circle were added into that chevron design to include the intersex community.
Now we will move on to prominent queer figures throughout history, and for this specific slide we will be talking about prominent Stonewall figures. So the first one was Marsha P. Johnson, who was a black trans activist and a drag queen who is famously known for having led the Stonewall riots. She is often referred to as the one who started them. However, she says that the riots were already happening and she just joined in. After Stonewall, she continued to become an activist in the field of LGBTQ+ work. She went on to found the Gay Liberation Front and STAR, which stands for Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. The second person on the list here is Sylvia Rivera, who is a Latin trans activist and a queer drag queen, who is also considered a prominent leader in the Stonewall riots. She was a good friend of Marsha P. Johnson and was also a co-founder of STAR alongside her. Stormé de Lavary was a prominent figure at Stonewall for fighting back against the police and acting as a spark that inspired Stonewall. It was rumored that as she was getting arrested, she called out to the crowd and said, "Why don't you guys do something?" which then in turn sparked everyone else to start the riot. Moving on to more general queer figures throughout history, we have Emily Dickinson, who is a poet who openly wrote about her love for another woman, which broke cultural barriers as this was very taboo at the time, as well as Elton John, who is a famous singer and songwriter who came out as bi in 1976. Harvey Milk, this person was one of the first few openly gay politicians to get elected in America. He fought hard to represent the community and supported their rights. Bayard Rustin, he also played a role by helping start the 1963 March on Washington alongside with Martin Luther King Jr., although he is often discredited because of his sexuality. Simon Nkolai, he's a South African hero who founded GLOW, the gay and lesbian organization of the Witwatersrand. He also started the first Pride Parade in Johannesburg in 1990 and convinced the Congress to recognize both gay and lesbian rights. When discussing important figures throughout history, it is also important to mention those with intersectional identities. This visibility of intersectionality is important to talk about because we want people to see just how diverse the 2SLGBTQIA community is, and that people with all kinds of backgrounds have had an impact in writing the history of this community. So without further ado, let us now talk about the prominent people with intersectional identities throughout history. The first of which being James Baldwin, who was a black gay novelist who escaped to France in order to avoid the oppression he faced in America. In France, he wrote about the negatives of the social structure, which is a common theme found throughout all of his work. There's also Tan France, who was one of the first few openly gay South Asian men on TV, and one of the first few openly gay Muslim men on TV as well. The next person on the list is Elder Myra Laramie, who coined the term Two-Spirited at a Two-Spirit conference in 1990. There's also Wiwa, who is a Zuni Two-Spirit, who acted as an ambassador for Native Americans and even traveled to Washington, D.C. to speak to President Grover Cleveland. There's Marsha P. Johnson, who we talked about earlier, again, a black trans drag queen and an activist prominent at Stonewall, as well as Sylvia Rivera, who is also who also had an intersectional identity for being a Latin drag queen, who was also an important figure at Stonewall.
Now, how do we support 2S LGBTQ plus identities within our own lives and communities? The first step is by becoming an ally. How do you become a better ally? The first step is to recognize your privilege. We're all privileged in one way or another. Although I am brown, Muslim, and female, I am also straight and cisgendered. Those privileges have affected the way I experience different aspects of my life, and we have to be aware of these factors and also learn about the queer experience by asking respectful questions. When we are confused or curious about something, ask. People are almost always happy and excited to share that part of who they are with you. So again, if you have a question about something people do, say, or wear, you can ask. Ensure you use the right words when asking these questions. Be careful of offending when you just want to learn more. Think before you speak. Watch out for sounding demeaning or condescending. If you feel like you might say something wrong, don't be afraid to ask how to say it. After learning more about queer issues and experiences, learning what contributes to these issues, you have to work to call them out in your day-to-day life. Whether it's standing up to a bully or pointing out a problematic quote-unquote joke, it is our jobs as allies to ensure all people feel safe and comfortable within our community. You may experience or see someone experiencing harassment or discrimination because of who they are. It is never okay, and we want to let you know that there are always resources available for you if you're experiencing anything or if you're seeing someone experiencing it. In addition to the resources we will mention towards the end of the slides, try to keep supportive people in your circle. Your friends can be an amazing support system, so make sure you know who you can go to. Everyone is encouraged to take some time to themselves to reflect on any unconscious biases they may have towards anyone in the community. Think about what thoughts and feelings come to you when people talk about LGBTQ plus people or issues, and ask yourselves why these thoughts or feelings are positive and how to make them more positive. If your friend is experiencing harassment, you're going to want to be that support system for them to show that you care. The biggest first step is to be approachable. If they try to come to you, keep an open mind and heart and listen to what they have to say. It is an important part of being a friend. In addition, be mindful of what the people around you are saying and doing. If someone's saying a slur or exhibits homophobic or transphobic behaviors, say or do something to let them know what they're doing is wrong. Do it to truly support those you care about, and do it to make sure the school is a safer environment for everyone. When you can, try to start a conversation about why these hateful behaviors are wrong. Some people may not know the extent of their behaviors, and it could be very beneficial to take a second to let them know. Finally, if you see harassment or discrimination happening, defend whoever it may be, because no one deserves. Now let's talk about pronouns. It is not something you might have thought of before, but 100% of humans have pronouns. Pronouns are simply words that can be used in place of your name when someone is talking about you. Before we get to the importance of pronouns, we all have to remember some things first.
Pronouns are not a recent phenomenon. It is part of a language. The only thing we have begun to do recently is state our preferred pronouns. It is something that is not all exclusive to trans people. There are many reasons people would state their preferred pronouns. For example, my name is Rahad, which is an Arabic name. When sending emails, for example, people here may see my name and not know which pronouns to use when addressing me, so I would have to make my pronouns clear. When someone states their preferred pronouns, we should make an effort to use them properly. We as human beings should respect each other, and part of that is respecting how we would like to be addressed. This goes for people who you are close to, people you don't know, or even people you might not like. Everyone deserves that base level of respect, and it is not up to you to decide who gets to be addressed with their preferred pronouns and who does not. As long as you remember that pronouns someone uses are part of who they are, it becomes really easy to adjust to anyone's pronouns. Now, here are some support resources and crisis hotlines for youth, more specifically LGBTQ plus youth. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a second for anyone that would like to take a picture. All of this would also be posted on the student-led board-wide equity group's Instagram and social media. The student equity group's Instagram as well as YouTube is linked on the slide over here. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, please feel free to DM us on Instagram, message myself, Rahad, or Morgan on Teams. We're the co-leads of the equity group, so we can answer any questions you might have. And there are more resources on our social medias if you want them. I hope that everybody learned something.